Welcome back, everyone. This is the Big Blue Banter podcast, where we aim to combine game film analysis with analytics and the eye test. And I am here, and I'm Dan Schneier, your co host, joined by my co host, as always, Nick Turchin. And today, we're here to break down the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft and everything that came with it. The New York Giants entered this draft with 2 draft picks in the first round, but by the end of it, as many of us have predicted over the last few weeks, they traded up, not back, but up to get one more draft pick. So we're going to jump right into this thing with our reaction to the first pick and obviously the most controversial pick. And that's Daniel Jones at number 6 overall. So, Nick, let's start with you and your initial reaction on the pick.
Initial reaction was shocked to see the developments as they were after the Raiders did what they did at the 4th pick. Taking a guy that I liked in Farrell, but I thought that opened up the options for the Giants at 6. There's no other way to say it. I was shocked. It was shocking. I had to put out my Jones thread early. And just in general, I don't see how you can get into even a second round grade for Dan Jones at this point in his career. But it just, they think that, and I think we can come away with some things that they really value moving forward at the quarterback position, because I think it's very clear the contrast in picking Jones over, say, a Haskins or over, say, a Rosen.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I say about that. I believe that, I'm not sure exactly where the Giants were on the Josh Rosen trade front. I mean, from what we've heard from Giants general manager Dave Gettleman, they never discussed terms with Arizona. All they told them was that, keep us in mind in case. And what we've heard since, at least from one report, is that the Cardinals wanted a first-round pick back for Josh Rosen. Now, I don't know the certainty of either of those reports. A lot of reports around draft time are, in my opinion, factually incorrect. But we'll find out soon, depending on if the Cardinals move Rosen today. But as far as the decision to draft Jones, my initial reaction is this: I was very surprised. I know that there were reports that dropped, even as recently as just before the draft from Ralph Acciano of SNY, who really does have an excellent track record when it comes to predicting Giants draft picks. So keep an eye on that going forward. He's well connected inside that building. And he said Jones is in play at 6, and it still shocked me because I did believe that Jones is a project, and I don't really understand taking a project with a pick that high. Now, the Giants clearly view the situation differently. They were convinced, whether it's right or wrong, that a team was going to select Jones before their second first-round pick and number 17 overall. They were convinced the Redskins were going to trade up. There's been reports that Jay Gruden and the coaching staff was in love with Jones, but Daniel Snyder, the owner, wanted Dwayne Haskins. There's even speculation that the Broncos were going to make a surprising play at Jones at number 10. And you see a draft video. The Broncos released a video after the draft where they already had a trade in place with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it was contingent on something. What was that something? I don't know. But after the Jones pick was made, Denver's it wasn't Elway. It was their second in command called up the Steelers like, do you guys still want to do the trade? So there is some belief, and obviously Jenny Fuentes of Monday Morning Quarterback, who's well connected in the NFL, including Ralph Acciano, who also says multiple sources have told them the NFL is a lot higher on Daniel Jones than consensus, than we may be, or than a consensus among NFL draft experts. So the decision to take Jones at 6, with all that in mind, is a little less perplexing to me, Nick. I get some of that, and that's part of the I guess the intensity and the pressure that you're put on as a general manager if you really do have a strong conviction on your guy. Now, it's clear the Giants have a strong conviction on Jones, and moving on from that, it's time for us to kind of break down and evaluate who he is as a prospect. So I want to throw this to you, Nick, right now. Can you give us your initial, just kind of quick reaction and evaluation on Jones and where you see him in his development? Can he develop into that franchise quarterback the Giants are obviously hoping he will be by using the number 6 pick?
Yeah, I think he's there's elements of his game that are very, very good. He's very athletic for his rather thin frame. When I was standing next to him at the Senior Bowl, he's kind of gangly. He's a little more gangly than you'd expect because the hits that he's taking. To be honest, I expected a little more of a stockier kind of build. the first thing that jumps to my mind that where he fits in with what the Giants do or want to do, or their answer for problems that the defense present, is in the quick game. During the season, during his senior season, he wasn't honestly that he wasn't. I don't think he excelled in this area, but in the Temple game, after a month of hanging with his team and hanging with his coach, and probably circling up with his professional coaches, and one of his professional coaches is or private coaches, I should say, is Eli Manning's private coach, and his quick game and his accuracy in the quick game from basically 0 to 12 yards was very good in the Temple game, and his ability and his footwork was a lot cleaner in that game. So you saw a market uptick after a month of basically probably thinking what he needs to do to put some good tape out there to be professional. So I kind of like that element. I think the Giants emphasize that, and will continue to emphasize that, because that's Pat Shurmur's answer to pressure, and it's basically the best thing for the Giants too with their current offensive line. So I get that side of it. The other part that you really have to see that they really fit, that they really like right now about him is his mobility, his ability to throw on the run. This is going to sound kind of fucked up. I think he's actually a better thrower on the run when he's actually moving laterally than Kyler Murray is. Kyler Murray does an unbelievable job of moving and then resettling himself. And actually, Lincoln Riley does a great job at a clinic of showing this, and then resetting his feet and firing. When you actually are moving laterally, it's very difficult to do. Jones is very good. He actually flashes a lot. Good little details, like gets downhill with the target almost always consistently. Stuff that you can see he's built for the bootleg game. If you think about it, Eli Manning ran the bootleg game a lot this year. He has no threat to run. Jones is a threat to run as well. So it's a nice kicker to add on there and something else they can work with. I would say, too, which is really funky to mention, I can't believe I mentioned this, but Daniel Jones' placement on his screen passes is very, very good. He always throws, always. It was really weird. He rarely missed his place on when throwing screen balls. And in general, I think he throws a pretty deep ball, and he ends up doing it in his decision making for the deep ball needs to improve. But when he does throw it and it works, it looks pretty good. So I know the potential's there. That's where he is right now. The downside, his issues are all in his footwork, his pocket movement, his pocket refinement, and as well as his play speed to deliver the ball on time. And the best guy who did a breakdown on that recently was Dan Orlovsky on Twitter, showing him, actually it was a Good Morning Football, I think, showing it basically a breakdown of him throwing a Haas concept and basically kind of messing up, and what he does when he messes up. His footwork breaks down, and his ability as a second reaction thrower is not really there. So that's the improvement. I think he has clear areas he needs to improve, but he has some clear things that he's very good at.
Yeah, Nick, and it's interesting because when I started to think this was going to happen, I did a quick breakdown on Twitter just because I went back and rewatched every single game that I could find on Jones, and I do think that the Giants like the touch he shows on tape, the timing and the quick passing game, and that's obviously something Shurmur stresses. The athleticism, like you said, he made some big time throws on rollouts, and not just even design plays. Sometimes when he rolled out of the pocket and made a throw on the run. These are things that I think that Pat Shurmur believes could help unlock his offense. I do believe that. And he does a really good job, Nick, and this is not something that we touch on, of making the throws before taking the hit. He's a really tough quarterback, in a sense, a lot like Eli Manning was back in his early days. From that standpoint. But I mean, if you watched his game film, and the Giants obviously have watched a lot of it, and you didn't say that you saw questionable decision making, dropped interceptions, lack of drive on his passes outside the hashes, down the seams, over the top, and you weren't concerned about what kind of prospect, what a prospect like that could translate to in MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, in the winds of East Rutherford, then you're just fooling yourself, because there are certainly things to worry about when you watch his film, and that's what makes him a project to me. Now, like I said, I came away more impressed with his arm talent than I originally thought when I went to my first review of him, because he made a lot more wild throws and big time throws than I expected. And like you said to me off air, Nick. And you can go over this again, but what were you told from an arm talent standpoint?
Kind of going through, and if you talk to a lot of quarterback evaluators, whether it's just clinic speak at clinics, and what we mean by that, when coaches speak to either lower level coaches or high school coaches at clinics, or stuff like that I've been exposed to, talking to guys like Ken Zampese, who coached both Baker Mayfield and Carson Palmer more famously at Cincinnati. They all talk about having just good enough arm talent. If they have three things they want, it's that box of arm talent is in the just good enough, because the ability to distribute on time and with good placement, the accuracy trumps that by far. If you are not accurate in this league, you do not survive. And so that's where I think that's where guys kind of get hooked on him a little bit, or kind of believe Jones checks that box, and you kind of have the mental makeup that they like. So I think two of those big boxes are checked. I think the other two or three, in terms of consistent accuracy, and consistent decision making, because consistent decision making, as you're saying, is right there too. So I think he's borderline on those, but I think the arm talent side is okay.
Yeah, and I can understand that, Nick. But my question for you with regards to that, and this is kind of what I was driving at before I let you explain that, is what happens, because this is a big concern of mine, what happens when he's forced off script and off platform? Do you think that is an area where, because teams, in my opinion, in the NFL can really do a good job of game planning against players with just good enough, or I guess limited arm talent? Because if you put enough pressure and you cloud that pocket enough and you force him to make throws off script, or when he's not set, or when a quarterback's not set, and you force these throws to come outside the hash marks instead of over the middle with a quick timing game, what exactly do you see? Or I'll ask you, let me frame it like this, Nick. How do you see Jones as a prospect combating that plan of attack on the defensive side of the ball? A heavy blitz, a heavy pressure.
It's not to give the college answer, but his ability with his legs and an ability to make the good decisions outside the pocket are just as important as inside the pocket. So, is he going to be able to drive? Well, there's actually one example in I think it was the Temple game, where he actually does do this, and he actually throws a type 1 throw, a low line drive throw on the same hash. That's a close nearby throw, but that's what he was able to do in college, which check that box. Does he do it consistently? No. And more importantly, I think when he's outside the pocket, he makes the wrong decision when he's outside the pocket. There are times situationally in games where he's throwing across into the grain, and his team's up by 3 touchdowns. And I don't know who's talking to him on the bench, but why are they saying why that ball? That he needs a little bit of help with. So the answer at the NFL side is, it's not that you can just. I think the answer is this: if you at the NFL level, and as it currently exists right now, the quarterback is 2.5 seconds before he's going to get hit, no matter what. What can you do in that 2.5 seconds? That is the entire game. So outside of structure, you can't bet on that. You can't. When that happens, in my opinion, make a play with your legs or get the fuck out of there, because you can't. The guys that rely on that, number one, they're going to give you big plays. If you watch Baker Mayfield off script, he almost looks like he's on script. He's so good. Yeah. And that's because he's coached so well. So you're not going to have that element with Jones. But that's why he's not, let's be honest, he's not a top tier, or at least in most guys' minds, I don't think he's not an upper first round guy. So, it doesn't mean he can't get there, but where he is right now, that's not part of his game where I think you're going to get wowed.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point there, and it is, we can't deny what Gettleman said is to the most part, at least goes along lines of what you just said, Nick. That a lot of you still have to make the plays from the pocket, and Shermer said the same thing. That's where most of the game is played. But at the same time, there are aspects of Jones's game that I wish he would get more aggressive with, and one of them is running the ball. And I hope that Shermer will have a more, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, but he needs to have more design runs in his game at the NFL level. I really do believe that. I said that when I posted a breakdown of him last weekend, and I believe that his athleticism as a runner, and especially his straight line speed, has to be factored in. If you're going to draft a player like this, you have to use that. You have to use more zone read. You have to use more design rollouts and design run plays in general. But I do think that one thing when it comes to Jones, and you could tell me if you saw this as well on tape, Nick, because I'm very interested, is that while he does have impressive athleticism as a straight line runner, I don't know if I believe in his ability to move laterally, which to me is more important when it comes to moving within the pocket and then moving outside the pocket and making throws on the run. Did you see the same thing? Questionable athleticism from a lateral standpoint rather than, moving straight forward as a straight line runner?
Not in a movement perspective or in his body moving perspective, but in his habits within the pocket to staying square to being downfield. Absolutely. I mean, that's one of his biggest problems is, and I would say that's through his footwork. So we're talking about sliding, we're talking about shuffling. Right. I don't think that's an athleticism thing. I think that's I'm going to to go ahead and say it. I think it's a good thing. You're either coaching or you're allowed it to happen. That's the quote. So that tape is out there for years on this guy, and I'm wondering why that wasn't really addressed, because you can distribute the ball a lot better when your shoulders are in position to fire the ball away. And especially in this league where, like we said, you're going to get hit in 2.7 seconds. So, but back to the point, though, you're exactly right. 66% of all dropbacks, a lot of coaches think the quarterback has to move somewhat, not scramble, but move off his spot. That's right. The reality of the NFL. So, yeah, has he mastered that? Not a chance. And he needs massive improvement there. And some would say that was Haskins' issue as well. And it's that was a problem with him as well. And you see it with college quarterbacks because they either grit their way through it by taking the hit, or the pass rush, it just doesn't. They're able to kind of avoid it much more easily or much quickly than they are at the NFL for sure.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't. I'm happy you broke that down, Nick, because you explained exactly what I was seeing. I just saw it in a different way, and I don't have the technical terms to know exactly, what I was seeing. And to me, it was a lateral quickness issue. But you said it best. And it's interesting what you say, Nick, about the percentage of plays where a quarterback does need to reshuffle his feet and reset his feet in the pocket. And it's interesting to me, Nick, because before the draft, on multiple occasions, Pat Shurmur said, what I'm looking for in a quarterback is the ability to clean his feet, he calls it, in the pocket. And that's just exactly what you just described. And if he hasn't seen it yet from Daniel Jones, you have to believe that, I guess it's a projection thing where he believes that he can coach that out of him. We didn't exactly see that from Eli last year, but that's a different story, I believe, because he's so much older at 38, and there's so much more time he's developed his habits. Would you agree with that? That at least from that standpoint, a 21-year-old prospect versus inheriting a 38-year-old prospect, it might be easier to improve that aspect, or is that something you think is just inherently in Jones's DNA?
I definitely think it's inherent. I think you can fix things with quarterbacks from their knees down for sure, and the way they time that up. I think Eli showed that better than anyone else. In 2014, after a preseason with McAdoo, his footwork was much better, and he was much more efficient. I actually broke that down in a couple of pieces earlier in the year, cover one, and that's what I thought kind of Shurmur was going to kind of tap back into a little bit. Clearly, that wasn't the case. Side of it too, when you talk about all this stuff, I would say that if the quarterback's feet are quick and light, they're going to be more trainable. I would say that Jones's feet are kind of in between light and heavy. You don't want a heavy-footed quarterback. A heavy-footed quarterback, or quarterback that bobs up and down a lot and gets his head moving up and down at level, is not something that has been historically very trainable. You want him to stop moving that way first. So I think there's hope, but it's not that. But it's something that, I'm really interested in this whole thing, what Shurmur wants to tackle in year one, if you're going to see it in year one, or if it's going to be something that he does in private workouts in next offseason.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, we'll see what the timeline is for Jones as we get closer to getting on the field, as we get closer, further along this process. But before we move on to the Jones pick and on to Dexter Lawrence and DeAndre Baker, I do want to talk, Nick, a little bit with you about kind of the overall process for the Giants and something that bothered me about last night. And, in the old days when Jerry Reese and Mark Ross made a pick, as meaningless as it was, they would give a nice explanation for the pick after and during the post-draft press conference. They'd give you little minute details that made you excited about what they saw in this prospect that others didn't see. Obviously, the most infamous one is when Jerry Reese compared Adrian Robinson to the Jason Pierre-Paul of tight ends, which clearly didn't pan out. And like I said, most of it is meaningless. But when Dave Gettleman, the general manager of the Giants, sits there and tells fans that he fell in love with a prospect after watching him for 3 series at the Senior Bowl, and I know he said he also loved his film, but he did make this point about the Senior Bowl. And obviously last year they drafted the Senior Bowl MVP. Apparently, this game is very important in the Giants' valuation. But, regardless of what happens with Jones, I just think there's inconsistencies in Gettleman's story, and I think he's taken a very arrogant approach to this job. He's in the past talked about how little importance he wants to put into analytics. And for me, Nick, it took me a lot longer to get this critical, because I think that, and we're not going to get into this now, but I think the Odell Beckham trade had a lot more to do with all-field stuff than anything else. And I'm not sold myself from a lot of the conversations I've heard from championship NFL football players that having a me first player like Beckham, and I know there could be debate on whether or not it's me first, but you could just look. I've covered this team for a long time, and there was after every game there was a lot of talk from him about what he did on the field or what he didn't do. And I just don't know. You listen to, for example, you listen to Ryan Clark talk, or I'm sorry, not Ryan Clark, Ike Taylor talk about why that Steelers championship team happened because their best player, Troy Polamalu, was the most humble player in the locker room. But anyway, moving on. Where he really loses me, Nick, is when he starts to talk about, value. He said multiple times before the draft class, Nick, that every pick was about value. So he preaches value. But at the same time, he could consider any pick of value when he sits there and he tells us that Josh Allen and Daniel Jones were graded out on the same line. And meanwhile, it's of course possible that he's right on this. There's no denying that. There's a chance that Daniel Jones might end up being an amazing NFL quarterback. You could say that about anyone. You could say about Josh Allen, last year's draft class. You can say about all these developmental quarterback prospects. Obviously, there's a ceiling, or else they wouldn't be drafted in the first place. But I just think that the way that he went about his post-draft presser and everything to that regard was very, I guess, inconsistent with what he has said before this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it seemed like there's a great Twitter handle for the investment world. It's called Shit Management Says, and it basically takes up like the bullshit quotes that you hear different companies say to investors, and it kind of like makes them kind of gloss over and feel better about themselves. And that's what he was giving many very random weird comments. Yeah, that was not really showing any piece into his logic or not wanting to give away his logic, which I get. But I like I was saying to Dan before, like I'm not saying you want like a rah-rah speech, but you can give an elevator pitch that talks about the bullish points of why you went to the podium and drafted a guy at 6 that really no one else thought was going to go until at least the lower part of the first round. Like, and show that enthusiasm, because that's what those that love ball, we just want to talk ball. Like, that's why I'm here. Like, it's not about like really not about the winning, losing, or being right or wrong. It's about getting better. And those guys generally like to do that. So I'm shocked that he doesn't like to do that, especially in a media room that really wants a lot of things outlined for them. And you hear other GMs, like I've said this a million times, so like Chris Ballard, these guys, like they just kind of talk to you like a human, and you kind of get an idea of what they think. So I have no idea. I really don't. And I think that I get what I do know from what his history is that he's going to overpay certain things, and they now value certain things a lot more than others. They value the mobility factor a lot more than others, I think. They value the, like you said, I mean, I think one of the biggest drivers is what they view the cultural fit, right? And I think they like the profile of whatever that is. I don't really know what it is. I know what the tape is. I don't know what the profile is for Jones himself, and probably applies to Lawrence too. And that whole Clemson D line, which is just like an awesome group. Like I want to draft every one of those guys. So I get that part of the decision making, but I don't know if the ball is really equaling out to what they're paying for from a value perspective.
Yeah, no doubt. And as we move forward, I think you just have to kind of wonder, where, I guess I would say, how long will this go on for? I mean, they're tied. This regime is now tied itself to Daniel Jones. When you do what you just said, Nick, and you kind of go outside of the script, the structure, and select a player at number 6 who, clearly has some flaws. And agreed, like you said, Nick, all the positives that we talked about already on this podcast, Nick. And I know neither of us are sold on him as a prospect, but all of the possibilities, the ability to unlock Shermer's offensive scheme with the rollouts and the bootlegs, the ability for design runs and zone read in the red zone, something we talked about all last season with the Giants' red zone offense issues. All of those things could have been talked about by Gettleman. And while it's not a big deal in the long run, because obviously it has no factor in whether or not the Giants will win or lose football games, it's something that I think the fans deserve. And I think it's something that they should have gotten. So, that's just kind of a philosophical argument that me and Nick are having here. And we were talking about it a lot before the podcast. So we wanted to just dive it in and kind of find out what you guys think about it. So feel free to reach out to us on Twitter and let us know if you felt a little cheated from that. But let's move on. The Giants obviously made 2 other first-round draft picks, and we want to get to them. So the Giants selected Dexter Lawrence, the Clemson defensive lineman, at number 17 overall. And there were rumors that the Giants were interested in Christian Wilkins. He wasn't on the board at 17. I would have been interested to see if he was on the board, if they would have taken Lawrence or Wilkins. There's also obviously interest in Clelin Farrell. The Giants brought him in for a private visit. He went at number 4 overall. when the Giants selected Lawrence, all of the offensive tackles, pretty much, with the exception of Jonah Williams, were on the board. The Giants passed over them. Obviously, the cornerbacks were on the board. The Giants passed over them and went back to them. And as far as the edge rushers go, Montez Sweat was there, but there were question marks about his about not only his off-field health issues and maybe some off-field other issues, but as Nick and I broke down on the last podcast, or actually Nick, you broke it down so eloquently, you weren't exactly sure he was the right fit anyway for this defensive scheme. So they decided on Lawrence. Now, there's been a lot of negative reaction to this pick. I don't see it. I don't buy that negative reaction. I had Lawrence as the number 20 overall player on my Giants big board. So obviously they took him at 17. It's not unbelievable value, but some of those players I ranked ahead of him, like Jerry Tillery, for example, were, or even other players were not playing at the same position. So what I'm driving at, Nick, here is that I trust the Giants a little bit more at any position on the defensive line than any other position. Last year, they saw something they liked on tape with B.J. Hill. You fast forward 6 months and the guy has 5.5 sacks while not even starting for all of the season, and while playing from, not even a position, the 5 and the 3 technique. So my question for you is this, Nick, from what you've seen with Dexter Lawrence, 1, do you think it could end up being a good value pick? 2, do you think that there's untapped potential with him as a pass rusher? Because that, to me, is the most important factor for a defensive lineman right now, where the Giants stand in James Fletcher's scheme. And then 3, I'm giving you a hard one here, Nick. Do you believe that his presence can help unlock the pass rushing prowess of other Giants defensive players?
Yeah, to the first part, I definitely think that from a value perspective, I'm high on Lawrence, but right now I don't think you can put it as a value, just because he's going to be he's a little more of a project, I think, because he's 340 pounds. He said that he wants to cut weight. He's a 340-pound freak. His body type is not like Snacks. He looks like a 310-pound guy on tape. He moves like a 310-pound guy on tape. He played in Clemson's base front, which really was a 4-eye, 0-4-eye. So for those listening, it's basically a guy lining up on the inside of the tackle, a guy lining up at the nose tackle position, and the guy lining up inside the tackle on the other side. He was one of the guys on the outside there. He was not the 0 tech. The 0 tech was Wilkins. And there's a reason why teams do that, and we can bypass all that. The bottom line is he actually rushed the passer, and I would say he's going to be more effective from the 3 tech position, particularly on sub-package downs, than the 1 tech. He is not really a very strong 2-gapper in terms of an occupying space and push-pull and basically punching out on the guy in front of him and then reading the keys of who's in front of him. He's better when he's moving and basically slanting or long sticking into different parts of different gaps in either a pressure or a run, basically, playing either side. And so interestingly, I really like him. I think that I like him because immediately he is as good as, I would say he's better than Ben Tomlinson and can unseat him pretty fast as an interior D lineman. I think his pass rush potential is way, way higher. And I think they think over time, if he can get there, you're going to he's a freak athlete. So what's his ceiling? I think it's kind of unknown. And you have a guy that was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Like he's a different type of player on their line. I just think the hard part is he's going to have to change. And then I'm a little surprised they would make this pick without having solidified the edge first. And that gets into a whole philosophical discussion, because I do think that a guy like Wilkins' profile, who is more of a speed rusher from the inside, is the better way to go for the Giants. But that's just my judgment. Their judgment is clearly that he's a freak and that Betcher can do things with him. The last part, or the other part of the question, can he unlock more of the scheme? I'm not really sure about that right now, except in twists and stunts. He's going to be way better than anyone they have as a kicker or a driver in stunts. So not to get super technical, but we do. BJ Hill struggled at times last year getting outside contain in a TE, a tackle end stunt, when he was the tackle, pushing outside and picking the offensive tackle and getting outside. It's very difficult to get outside, especially as a rookie. The coaching points are difficult. This guy, Lawrence, does this and like really does it well. And he's pretty violent with the tackles at impact. So, I think that's something where it's immediately going to help that part of it, but the rest of it is going to be up to Betcher's creativity, because it's not like it's going to be an outside rusher that's going to demand or command double teams or slides or that type of thing.
Yep, and I think that you bring up a bunch of excellent points there, and I love the technical breakdown there, Nick, because even I can learn from you, which is always my favorite thing. But let me just say this, Nick. There's a few notes, and I think that played into this role. I'm also on board with this pick, and I've, in addition to my own personal ranking of where I had him on the Giants board as a top 20 player, and my personal opinion, the Giants have done a really excellent job developing defensive linemen throughout the last 10 to 15 years. You look at the player who Pat Shurmur, right in his post-draft press conference, compared him to, and that's Linville Joseph. And then you go over to Mock Draftable, where they kind of take the athletic testing. And I wish I could have seen his 3-cone drill and the agility testing, but it's not up, and I guess he didn't do that. But one of his closest athletic comparisons, Nick, is Linville Joseph. Another one of his closest athletic comparisons is Haloti Ngata. So this is not exactly a Damian Harrison type player. I mean, he, at 6'4.5" and 342 pounds, he has a wingspan of 84 inches in the 97th percentile among defensive linemen, arm length in 34.5 in the 90th percentile, his hand size is in the 88th percentile, and he had 36 bench press reps in the 96th percentile, and he had almost a 5 flat 40-yard depth. So I believe the Giants not only like what they saw already on tape from him, they think there's a lot of untapped potential, and I'm going to go ahead and bank on that for the reasons I just previously stated, but also because, you saw during the pre-draft process when Mike Garafolo reported this, James Bettcher was at his pro day, and James Bettcher took a liking to him at his pro day. So specific to the Giants scheme, there may be some areas, just like you kind of broke down, Nick, that they already see, and they already believe that, if we can improve this area, we can make a bigger impact on our defense than by, adding another rotational edge, at least based on the ones who are on the board, to compete with Marcus Golden and Lorenzo Carter and whoever else they might bring in there at the end of the draft. And they're going to take an edge at some point in the next 2 days. So for me, I like the pick overall. And if I were to give it a grade, I would give it a strong B+. Where would you land on the grade here? And obviously for reasons that we don't have to discuss, we didn't put a grade on the Jones pick. But where would you give a grade for this?
As a player individually, like absent of the team makeup that he's going to, A- to B+. Within the team structure, I'm puzzled, but that has nothing to do with him. I think he's going to be fun to watch and really fun to see what he becomes if he gets. I don't want to say this because this is like whenever you start throwing this shit out there, it's like you just give him the kiss of death, but Fletcher Cox is a 335-pound guy who can win with speed and power. There's not many guys that have the potential to do that. That's what they're swinging at when they take this. I don't see it yet, but they see that, and that's cool. Let them run with that, because that's a real thing that you can have there. And there's not many of those guys that have that ability with that size and the athleticism. So again, two guys that need certain parts of development in the first round. But the guy at 17, that's going to be exciting development, I think.
I like it, Nick. And like I said on our last podcast, and I'm standing by it, and I'll see if I'm proven wrong in 5 years or so. One of these 3 defensive linemen on Clemson is going to bust. That's my personal opinion. We'll find out soon enough. I think one of them was benefiting from the others. I don't think it's Lawrence. I've already said I think it's Farrell, but he was obviously the first man off the board. So we'll see. We'll see if he can, win in some of the same ways he won in college off the edge. But I'm excited about this Lawrence pick, I'll be honest. But I'm most excited, Nick, about the last pick. I don't love the process the Giants went about. I don't think you should ever really be trading up in the NFL draft. I think you should let it play to you. And, there's some really, really good economic articles articles that use economics to explain why you should always be trading down the NFL draft and almost never be trading up. But the Giants did it. They gave up the 2 draft picks they acquired via Damon Harrison and Eli Apple. And I don't know for sure, Nick, but something tells me Dave Gettleman in his mind rationalized it like, we needed to get Apple and Harrison off the team anywhere. So, what these picks were just luxury to us. They were bad locker room guys, whatever. But they drafted DeAndre Baker, Nick, and this was my most excited pick from a value standpoint. They got him at 30. I had him as my 21st best player on my Giants big board. I had him as my number 1 overall cornerback for the Giants, Nick. And again, I don't know if that ranking would be the same if I was covering another team, a zone heavy team. I'd probably have Byron Murphy or a team that believes in totally taking a swing for the fences on a guy like Greedy Williams, who to me I don't like Greedy Williams at all. I think his frame is too slight, and I don't like to draft players who don't like to tackle. But Baker's not one of those players. For me with DeAndre Baker, if you're looking for a weakness, it's only the straight line speed and maybe his ability in one-on-one man coverage to keep up with super fast wide receivers on vertical routes. But for as far as what he's shown from what I've seen and from what I've read and from what, a lot of the coverage statistics show, you're getting a player who hasn't given up a passing touchdown since 2016. You're getting another player from that Kirby Smart Georgia defense. And Nick, you've talked about this, and you're the one who put me onto this. The Giants run a lot of the same defensive concepts that Georgia runs, and maybe that's a reason why they've now selected two players in back-to-back years from Georgia, Lorenzo Carter and DeAndre Baker. And then if you want to go a little further, they used one of their priority UDFA signings last year on Aaron Davis, the cornerback out of Georgia, who I really thought was going to make the team and make some kind of noise until he got injured during camp. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on the DeAndre Baker pick? For me, I'm all in.
Yeah, as a player, I like it. I like kind of what you really just I think you kind of made it better. The scheme fit immediately. The scheme, he's very scheme. He can play many different things. He's got experience playing match, which helps. I like him a little better as a boundary corner. So what I mean by that is in a 3-by-1 set, he's covering the lone one wide receiver on either side of the field, the lone X wide receiver. I think he can do that. To Dan's point, his straight line speed isn't necessarily there, but I'm okay with that because of his ability to compete at the catch point. That's what leaps off the tape for him. Anything where he's driving, not just driving downhill, but in man, having to find the guy's hands or find the ball. This guy does this very well. And to be frank, it's a weak draft class. For corners, I think this is I think you either go with a guy like this, I agree with you on Williams, or you're looking at a guy 3rd or 4th round, which is why guys like you and me like Sam Beal so much in the supplemental draft as a 3rd rounder. So I like that aspect. But I think like you said, I think they spent a little bit, and it's kind of interesting how they're reaching and to get back in the 1st round. It felt like a little bit of a panic move. But I like it. I think they absolutely need it. I think that the defensive backfield is very, they need competition there. I don't think he's going to bump inside and play slot. I think he can if he had to. I think Sam Beal can actually do that too. I think he did that at times. Right. I remember correctly in my notes. So it's you're giving different options for different matchups, right? Because look at his profile. He's 5'11", 185-ish, right? He's a little undersized. Right. Beal is what? He's long. He's 6'2" and a half, I think. So you're setting the foundation, good differentiated corners in some ways that can both play soft press and are comfortable in multiple schemes. That's huge. The other side of it too, just a quick spoiler alert, I was watching Baker because I think that, to Dan's point, Walker, the jack linebacker, outside linebacker, I think maybe even play for the Giants in the 3rd or 4th round. He's a guy that is very much like Lorenzo Carter, but he's a little bit better of a pass rusher, at least on tape. So anyway, just that's why I was watching. And I like the pick. I like that they took a stand, especially since they did not go after guys in the free agency market on the cornerback side, because let's be honest, Jenkins is probably not going to be here after next season. That's just the reality of the world, and he's getting older too. So you have to plan for these premium positions and pay the price right now.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've discussed in the past your feelings on Pro Football Focus versus mine, but I do think they do a good job of analyzing some positions for sure. Cornerback's one of them I've always felt like they've done a good job with, and he's had back-to-back 90-plus grades from Pro Football Focus while playing like the SEC. And like I said, hasn't given up a touchdown since 2016. So this is a player I'm very excited about. But before we move on to day 2, and we're obviously excited for that tonight, we're going to answer your questions as well that you had from day 1. So let's jump into those right now. Gregory Fontaine asks, will the Giants trade back into the 2nd round for offensive line edge or linebacker, and what would be the cost?
I see that. I don't know the cost. I think they're going to get back in the top 100. I think they have to. Because I just think that so many of those of the day 3 picks that they have are real wild cards, and I think they would be better off with at least with one other option in the top 100.
Yeah, I mean, it's Dave Gettleman, Greg, so you can be sure that he's going to try to trade back up. Like we said before, although all economics and analytics suggest that you should always be looking to trade back, that's not Gettleman's mindset, and he doesn't believe in that stuff. He's already made it clear that analytics are not important to him for what, he has his own approach. And so I don't think they're going to trade back up in the second. It's just going to be too hard. They have I believe it's the last pick in the third round? They've numbered 95 overall. It might be the last pick in the third round. I think there's a better chance, Greg, that they'll package that pick and with others, including potentially a 2020 pick. Gettleman's not afraid to trade next year's picks. Again, he's just not afraid to trade assets to move up. And I think they'll probably move up. My guess would be they move up to the beginning of the third round. So they'll wait like 30, 35-ish picks and then find a guy that they like just too much and they can't wait on. But I think that's probably the most likely scenario, I would say. Travis D'Alessandro says, why? So this is just a funny question that I want to feature. I mean, I'll just break it down to one thing, Travis. I believe why is because the Giants don't care about consensus valuations, and they're looking for other things at the quarterback position than other teams. So their evaluation of the players may be different than other teams. David Seidenfrau asks, how likely are the Giants to trade a 2020 pick to grab another asset? They already grabbed their quarterback, so they don't need those assets as much for next year, and they have an extra 3 picks for next year. Or they have an extra third-round pick for next year.
Yeah, basically kind of what we just said, right? Like I think that day 2 is day 2 within and like Dan said, I didn't realize that the last question was second round only. I think the third round is going to be some spots, and yeah, that'll be the way to go, I think.
Okay. Benji asks us, Nick, are they counting on BJ Hill to make an even bigger jump as a pass rusher, hence the Lawrence pick?
I don't see that as super related, just because I think that they're a little different in their profile, but they are interior linemen. I think this. I think he had a good year as a pass rusher. He had the sacks, he had the production, he's got a good arm over move, he's got a good motor. In fact, I really like his motor. I like him as a leader. I think the Lawrence pick is more of a that's got to basically bring out the best. Where it's not, hey, these are guys. What was the term that Banks has used with you? The scholarly. It's not a scholarly roster. Where basically once you have your position, you have your position. Yeah, they want competition. I think Lawrence is the fire to help Tomlinson get better and vice versa and everything. It's basically come in and be part of a two D line rotation, and he adds a couple elements that other interior linemen don't have.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see because we've talked, Nick, in the past about how the competition at other positions will help this roster. So, that process or that line of thinking should apply as well to the defensive line, which we both agree is one of the most important positions in a roster building. Another question from Benji asks, will Daniel Jones play if the Giants are below 500 in week 8?
I think he has to, because now if you have back-to-back years and you're 5-11 and you're the head coach, I know that Giants and I know that now they're hitched to Jones and whatever, but I think Shermer understands that it's that he's offensive line, but there are many, and I think he will play him because he's going to want to he's going to want to try to ride some wave through the end of the season. I think he will.
Yeah. No doubt, Nick. I would agree with you on that. I think the Giants have made it seem publicly like they're all behind Eli Manning, but it's clear to me via their actions, using the number 6 overall pick on a quarterback, that they're not fully bought in. Now, if they had made a trade for someone like Josh Rosen, where you don't have to give up as high of a draft pick, you don't make a financial commitment to that player, I wouldn't be as sure, because I would think that that's kind of just like we'll take a chance on this guy with an eye toward the 2020 draft class at the quarterback position. But we know now they're not going to be able to get a quarterback in the 2020 class because they've hitched their wagon to Daniel Jones. So the sooner they can get him in the mix, the better chance the Giants have, if they're right about Jones, of building a winning franchise. We know from the way that NFL rosters have been built, winning rosters, teams that have won or made the Super Bowl in recent years, a lot of them have the same thing in common, a quarterback on his rookie contract. Sure, you can point to all these other examples as well, but most of them involve Tom Brady. I mean, come on. Like, we're talking about very few people. Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, and to name a few that have players who have won before, or I'm sorry, after their rookie contract was over and they already paid against the salary cap. But it's not the safest way to, or not the safest, I'm sorry, that's not the right word. It's not the optimal way, in my opinion, to build a winning roster. So I believe the faster they get him on the field, the better, if they're in fact correct about Jones. And our last question for today comes from Client 9, who asks, how can Gettleman fail to draft a pass rusher with his first three draft picks?
Yeah, and that so one way to look at this may be the profile that Betcher wants on the outside is enough. Is the priority is a dual threat to drop into coverage, into coverage, and to rush the passer. So that's why he doesn't want to spend premium pick on production at the edge. He would rather get a guy who has the traits to be able to play in the system. Again, kind of basing the model, if Betcher's looking at Georgia's defense and those influences from those types of players in college, those guys don't have dominant production pass rushers either on the edge. So maybe that's the answer. That's the only thing I can give you, because I don't get it, and I don't get it because here's the other side. What I don't get: if you can't improve your secondary in 2 seasons, which now the Giants are getting there, right? The easiest way to improve your secondary is to improve your pass rush. And one guy can do that in the NFL. They're not going to get Khalil Mack, but just turn on Khalil Mack's tape and you can see that. So the impact is there. The potential impact is there. So I don't understand it, because especially in this league where everything is quick game and everything is under 2.4, 2.5 seconds, if you have a guy who's a 3-tech who can collapse the pocket and getting pass rushing lanes, you can disrupt the quick game. This isn't a 5 and 7-step drop league where you need a guy burning around the edge all the time. Not that way. And so I don't get it, especially not just really emphasize this point, but this isn't just 3 first-round picks. This is 2 top 6 picks and then the other one being a top 20 pick. So in 18 months, it's a premium position in this league, and it's not being addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it has to do with the scheme, Nick, and you touched on it, but I think that they have a different opinion of how they're going to generate a pass rush as a defense based on their scheme. I also think that they really do believe that Dexter Lawrence will be a better pass rusher than he is, or has proven to this point in his career, I guess you should say. So I think it's kind of a twofold question, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that the best way to improve your secondary is via the pass rush, and I think everybody understands this concept in the NFL. But there's also a chance the Giants feel comfortable with their evaluations of the mid-round pass rushers, edge rushers within their as specific to their scheme. Because again, the one advantage we have talked about previously on this podcast, Nick, and I do truly believe in, is that because their defense is very unique and it's really different than what you see across the league, they will have an opportunity to draft players that are much higher on their draft board and for correct reasons based on the schematics than other teams. So, time will tell there. I do expect them to pick up at least 1 pass rusher in the next 2 days, but, we'll find out as we move forward. But on that note, guys, we're going to sign off for today. You can expect to hear back from us at the end of this draft class once we have more time to digest all of the late round picks, a lot of the players who we're going to have to learn a lot more about. So sometime next week, you'll hear from us again. Thanks again for tuning in. As always, guys, we really appreciate your support on this podcast. We're seeing the numbers grow every week, and that's a testament to you guys, the listeners. If you do enjoy the podcast, please do us a favor and tell your friends, tell your family, tell whoever you want. Help us spread the word. And at the same time, please do us the favor of downloading the podcast via iTunes, subscribing to it, and, of course, giving us a rating and a review if you can to help us boost up that algorithm. But on that note, thanks again, guys, and we will talk to you soon.